The Subaru BRZ and Scion FR-S are among the most hyped new cars in the history of car making. They've even been hailed as the saviors of automotive enthusiasm, their tight handling, rear drive, and a price human beings can afford. But should you buy one just because, or are there better choices in the used market that would make you even happier? That's what we're talking about today. You told us, and we're going to tell you right back. Ian Whalen's here, Mr. Saab. That's today on Road Testament. At Drive on Twitter, Facebook.com/DriveTV, and apparently flannelinthehouse.org.
I don't know what happened
I
there.
don't know, wardrobe malfunction today. On Road Testament, the Subaru BRZ and obviously Scion FR-S, but they're both to us the BRZ. That's how we're going to refer to him. A Twitter user inspired us to do this topic that we're going to be talking about today. And basically his dilemma was, do I buy a new BRZ or do I buy a used BMW E46? And it made us kind of think, well, you know, the BRZ is the second coming of the rear drive sports car, right?
Yeah.
And it's around 26 grand. But do you spend that money and get a better used car, right? If you're an enthusiast. So basically that's something we are now calling BRZ or that. And hashtag, right. So really, it's, do you buy a BRZ? It's pretty simple. Do you buy a BRZ or do you buy something else? And if we have to thank Saudi Boy. Thank you, Saudi Boy. That was his dilemma. So Subaru BRZ, Scion FR-S, around 26 grand, rear drive, 2-liter naturally aspirated, 100 horsepower per liter, right?
Yeah.
200 horsepower, 151 pounds-feet. Not gigantic numbers, but you know, you look at that number, it's 2,800 pounds, lightweight, great car to throw around.
Today.
Ish.
Compared to most cars of today.
So we asked you guys whether you would buy a new BRZ or something else and what that would be. So let's go through a couple of those because basically this show is all about you guys. I'd buy a manual E46 M3 over BRZ, a BRZ over a regular E46.
There's one E46 besides the M3 that might be worth thinking about. It's the ZHP E46.
Right. That's actually, I don't know how many there are out there. Probably harder to find.
Yeah, it's probably harder to find than an M3.
But what is that?
It's just a special option package that they had, and it was just a special interior, a hotter cam, higher red line, better suspension. It was kind of like the SI version of the 330, but they didn't call it that. Yeah.
You know, it's a good... but there are actually more E46s. I mean, if you just do a standard search. Yeah. And the E46 is around 25 grand now. CT Mechi says used S2000. That's Honda S2000. I will be talking about that. That was one of your picks.
Yeah.
You can get a 4-year-old 135i for the same money. I love the FR-S. I go for the 135i, says Garth Mercer. The 135i is... not my favorite, but I like it. It's a great engine.
I could see
a little soft in the suspension.
I could see the value there.
But yeah, value-wise. BRZ, BMW has lost their appeal and have lost their clients to Audi. Their lineup has become bloated and meaningless. Renil Patel, a continual jab at BMW.
Well, that might be true, but I think we're talking about slightly older BMWs. For the money.
Right,
you know.
and let's just be clear that the BRZ and the E46 are very different cars.
Yeah.
But for kind of, it's that enthusiast head, do I buy, you know, the new lightweight sports car or do I buy the higher end, you know, more super sports car that's just appreciated a lot.
Yeah.
All right, so I like the Toyota, but the E46 M3 is definitely a better value. Sarge Dillon says that. You could spend, you know, the other thing is how much money do you want to spend on maintenance? We'll talk about that a little bit. The Z4 3.0, it's just funny how many BMWs that people have matched up against the BRZ because it's depreciation
There's also
of good
not
BMWs.
that many other choices in rear-wheel drive manual transmission.
Well, there are a few.
Sporty cars.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, that's the go-to. BMW has always been the go-to. Loved how they drive despite lack of torque. That's a traditional knock on the current BRZ. I mean, of course, we're all waiting for what's going to come up next, whether it's a turbo. They keep saying there isn't any, but obviously there will be. Bought an 8,000-mile used Golf R instead. It's another thing. Already made my decision, as you can see in my avatar. And if you check out, Toge Noob is a proud BRZ owner. Let's go. Another E46 BMW. It's actually cheaper. You could put an extra 10 grand in your pocket for maintenance.
Yeah.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Late 90s Porsche 911. I don't think you can get a 993 for that.
No, but you could probably get a
BRZ,
964.
which is something that you picked, and we're going to be talking about that too. Of course, Jack Gray, who always thinks outside the box, 66 Chevy 2 in good condition, the muscle car choice. And Rami Tuma articulates exactly what we were talking about. I think most of us are waiting to see a higher performing model come out, hoping we get details in 2013. Can't wait forever. Subaru, Toyota.
It'll also be more expensive.
Well, yeah, so then we're talking about 30 grand.
Right,
so
then we could do this show all over again.
we'll have to do the show all over.
Just kidding.
We're going to do it all over again anyway. But
Yeah.
anyway, so these are our picks, and we're going to just burn through these so you guys can get on with leaving comments on what you think that you would do. Because, you know, this show is actually about the comments.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what we say. You could actually just turn this off right now and just go straight to the comments. But of course you want to hear what Mr. Saab has to say.
Well,
so.
I like other cars besides Saab's, and I would like to actually own a 911 at some point. I think the 964 is a nice car, and you could get one now for mid-20s.
Especially a Targa.
Especially a Targa, yeah. So that's something to think about, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's something to think about. Again, it's just a maintenance issue.
Right. This is going to be a lot more difficult to or more expensive to maintain than a BRZ.
Yeah. So the benefits of the BRZ are obviously that it's a new car, right, with a warranty. They've done some things to make it trackable, where they've actually made it ready to take a cage in. They're actually, if you look behind the dash, there are you could almost see the mounting points for roll cage.
That's cool.
And in the back, you can fit 4 tires. They've actually designed the rear hatch so you could fit 4 tires and a helmet.
That's great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's made to be tracked.
Yeah.
Now, you know, it's obviously if you buy a 964, it's not a car that you're going to be able to track without a little bit of investment in it.
Yeah. It's just not it doesn't come out of the box that way.
Right. Exactly. But enthusiast choice. All right. Okay. This is another one of your picks, but it's a great pick, and it's also one that Twitter
I still really like the S2000, and I think that this car is, you know, it's a lightweight Japanese sports car, just like the BRZ, except the roof comes off.
Right.
The thing about this car is that you could still find them with relatively low mileage because they were usually not bought as first cars for most people, and you know it's a pretty bulletproof car. So if you're worried about getting something like a 911 that's maybe a little older and maybe more expensive, this is probably a little closer to what the BRZ experience would be like as far as maintenance and upkeep and all that.
Yeah, and it does fall into the category of buying a higher end car for, you know, at depreciated prices rather than buying a BRZ, which actually is a little bit more of an economy car.
Right. This was a more expensive car when it was new. I think it was about 30 grand.
It's 32 to eventually up to almost 40. But
and it had a lot of kind of high-tech stuff for the time that was sort of derived from the NSX program.
Well, this is right. This is actually when Honda was on its game with this kind of stuff. So I mean, you're right. I mean, it's trickled down from the NSX, and Honda just doesn't have anything right now that has this kind of mojo to it. I mean, and especially, we'll see how the BRZ does. They're going to have to respond with something soon. So, all right, what's next? All right, so SW20 Toyota MR2, older, and you got to go. I mean, it's 20 years plus now.
You're going to have to spend a little money to find one that hasn't been overly tuned and beat up. But there are nice ones out there.
There are nice ones out there. I mean, I saw one for about 20 grand, which is a lot, but it's the turbo, and it was in fantastic condition. Somebody had kept it, but I mean, it feels weird paying 20 grand for like an 18 to 20-year-old car. But this generation MR2, and like the S2000, is also a little bit upscale, because this is when the MR2 went upscale. It handles great, and when it first came out, the journalists were complaining that it had a lot of snap oversteer.
It's going to inspire you to become a better driver.
It inspired you to become a better driver, but what they did, they actually they called it Bambi on ice for a while.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah, but what happened was Toyota came up with a suspension geometry fix. So they actually made it. They gave it a little more understeer.
Okay.
So they dialed out some of that stuff, but the original cars were actually fairly edgy, and that was what people who really love the SW20s really love about them, is that they're edgy, and it's, you know, of course they're great interiors. So if you could find an early car that's in great condition, you know,
and it's mid-engined.
And by the way, we wanted to put this in. This is Leo Parente's pick. This was his company car.
Yes.
So. Had to put that in there. All right, next. All right, so obviously I put this in.
It's a great car.
The Lotus Elise, they're down in the mid-20s. You know,
you might have to hunt a little bit for that.
You have to hunt a little bit for that, because right after the crash, the economic crash, not the, not the you know, backwards off the road, they were going for 20.
Wow.
Right?
I didn't know
they
that.
had dropped all the way to 20. I saw a couple for in the 19s. Now they've gone back up. That's because you're not going to be able to get this car anymore.
Right. Keep in mind, this also has a Japanese reliable engine.
It's got the Japanese reliable engine. Speaking of the MR2, it's got the next generation MR2 in Toyota Celica derived 1.8 liter. What do you got? It's another 200 horsepower car. Kind of like the BRZ, it's in the 200 horsepower range.
It's a little less than 200.
190. It's 189, 190, right? Okay. So, but also lowish torque. I mean, the torque is only like 130 on it, right? Something like that. But super light, right? So power to weight is great.
Yeah.
What is that? What is it, like 2,300 pounds? The BRZ is 28. So power to weight is really probably in this car's favor. Yeah. Okay.
And it's a Lotus.
And it's a freaking Lotus, right?
I mean, if you drive around in that car, you're going to turn a lot more heads than the BRZ. So there's that aspect too.
Right. You do have shock and awe aspect. Again, though, other than the engine, which is really a piece of cake to maintain, don't ever hit a parking nub with that thing, because you basically have to replace this. It's super expensive. Any body stuff is super expensive. I mean, so. Yeah. You know, that might be a good way to get a cheap one, because I've seen Elises with body damage that you can get for 15 grand that are mechanically perfect. But obviously you want the aero intact, so that's an issue. Anyway, this is the E46 that Saudi boy was planning. And I think he actually chose the E46 instead of the BRZ. I don't know if he bought it yet, but we'll find out. BRZ or that. E46, just one last thing. It's a freaking fantastic car. Probably one of the best $20,000 cars now, or 25, I guess you'd have to pay for a really good one.
Yeah, I think it's a really
but
awesome
they're out there.
car.
It's a fantastic
and it still has some of those classic looks of BMW.
Exactly. BRZ or that, what do you think? Put it in the comments, put it in Twitter, put it wherever you want it. I don't care. Facebook.com/DriveTV. And that's it. Ian Whalen.
Mike Spinelli.
Short road testament today, right to the point.
I like it.
Yeah, that's right. We will see you guys next week. All right, later.